Come down. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. James Tabad Paramahamsa, Parudikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Parudikacharya Ashtotar, the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 28th day of September 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in Chapter 2, entitled Contents of the Gita Summarized. Text number 19 on page 85. Hey Bob, good to see you. Again. All right, you want a book? We have so many books. We'll get you a copy. Okay, text 19. Yaenam veti hantaram yaschainam manyate hitam Ubhauta unabhijanito nayang hanti nahanyate yahenam veti hantaram yaschainam manyate hitam Ubhauta unabhijanito nayam hanti nahanyate yahenam veti hantaram Yaschanam manyate hitam Ubhauta unabhijanito nayam hanti nahanyate. Go ahead, Glenn. Yahenam veti hantaram Yaschanam manyate hitam Ubhautau na vijanito. Nayam hanti na hanyate. Prakash, go ahead. Yehenam veti hantaram. Yashchainam manyate hitam. Ubhautau na vijanito. Nayam hanti na hanyate. Not na. Ya enam. Ya enam veti hantaram. Yashchainam manyate hitam. Ubhautau na vijanito. Nayam hanti na hanyate. Yaha, anyone who, enam, this, veti, knows, hantaram, the killer. Yaha, anyone who, cha also, enam, this, manyate, thinks, hatam, killed, ubhau, both, tau, they, na, never, vijanitaha, are in knowledge. Vijanita are in knowledge. Na, never, ayam, this, hanti, kills, na, nor, hanyate, is killed. Translation. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge, for the self slays not nor is slain. Purport. When an embodied living entity is hurt by fatal weapons, it is to be known that the living entity within the body is not killed. The spirit soul is so small that it is impossible to kill him by any material weapon, as will be evident from subsequent verses. Nor is the living entity killable because of his spiritual constitution. What is killed, or is supposed to be killed, is the body only. This, however, does not at all encourage killing of the body. The Vedic injunction is ma hingsyat sarva bhutani. Never commit violence to anyone. Nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone without authority is abominable and is punishable by the law of the state as well as by the law of the Lord. Arjuna, however, is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. I'm sorry? No, whimsically means just for no good reason. Just because you want to. Somebody wants to. So, in this verse, as in others in this section, Krishna is emphasizing to Arjuna that the soul is immortal. The soul is never born, never dies. And there's a lot of this use, hanta, hanyate, we'll see that in the next verse also, which means to kill, because they're on a battlefield. And the whole idea is that Krishna is trying to get Arjuna to take up his weapons again and fight the battle, because that's his duty, and that is an essential element of Krishna fulfilling his plan for reinstituting Dharma in the world. The whole idea is that this Bhagavad Gita is a small section of a book called the Mahabharata. And the context is that the Pandavas, who were the rightful inheritors of the throne, have been cheated out of their inheritance by the machinations of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, especially his son. It's a long story, which we don't have to go into now. But the Yudhishthira, who is the eldest brother of the Pandavas, Arjuna's elder brother, is Dharma personified. He's the son of Dharma, of Yamaraj. And he's a personified Dharma, and he's meant to rule the world. And that was Krishna's plan. That's part of what he accomplishes when he comes to the earth. As we'll learn in chapter 4, Yada yadahi dharmasa glana bhavata bharata. Now this is a verse that is like taught to children in India. Yeah. Right? Everybody knows this verse. Right. So that verse, which says, where there is an upsurge of adharma in the world, irreligion, or dharma becomes unregular, and it's upsurge of irreligion, at that time I manifest myself. And what do? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya dushkritam dharma sangstapanataya sambhavami yuge. I protect the devotees. That's the first thing. We saw that, with Nrsingadev and Prahlad, and Krishna is protecting all of his friends in Vrindavan. He does that. That's the main reason he comes. And he destroys the miscreants in doing that, the evil doers. That's part of what he does. And he reestablishes Dharma by his words, such as Bhagavad Gita. And Srimad Bhagavatam is also written by Vyas, Veda Vyas, who's understood to be Krishna Dvaipayanadvas, an expansion of Krishna. And it's full of words about Krishna and by Krishna in his various incarnations. And he does it through his representatives. So this is Krishna's mission, and suddenly Arjuna is not performing his essential duty to fulfill this mission. So this is what the Bhagavad Gita is all about, and here the essential first step of spiritual life, of understanding the Bhagavad Gita, of actually becoming a human being rather than just a two-legged animal, is to understand that we are spirit, not matter, that we were never born as spirit, and we will never die. And the whole mission of human life is to regain that understanding and to live in that spiritual existence. And the way to do that is to reconnect to Krishna. Just as Arjuna is of course eternally connected as a friend, but to really be connected means to do the will of the Lord. And what's so wonderful is we have so many explicit instructions of how we can do that. And when we do that, we find ourselves, our consciousness becoming purified, more peaceful, naturally joyful, and ultimately confident of the ultimate goal of life, going back to Godhead, as Prabhupada so wonderfully phrased it. So this verse is one of several in which he's saying, well, the soul cannot be killed. Later on, he'll make it more explicit. The soul can't be burnt, it can't be cut, it can't be drowned, can't be dried up, blown away. He says that twice, actually. So this is part of the context of being on the battlefield. Okay, so if no comments or questions, we'll move on to the next verse. Now this next verse is the most quoted in this whole section. Prabhupada quoted it all the time, sometimes part of it, and it kind of summarizes the whole lesson here. Jayate mriyate vakadachan nayam bhutva bhavitava nabhuviya ajo nityak shashvatoyam purano nahannite hanyamane sharire. For the soul, there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. Purport. Qualitatively, the small atomic fragmental part of the Supreme Spirit is one with the Supreme, qualitatively. He undergoes no changes like the body. Sometimes the soul is called the steady or the kutastha. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body, remains for some time, grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. The soul, however, does not go through such changes. The soul is not born, but because he takes on a material body, the body takes its birth. The soul does not take birth there, and the soul does not die. Anything which has birth also has death. And because the soul has no birth, he therefore has no past, present, or future. He is eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. That is, there is no trace in history of his coming into being. Under the impression of the body, we seek the history of birth, etc., of the soul. The soul does not at any time become old, as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. The changes of the body do not affect the soul. The soul does not deteriorate like a tree, nor anything material. The soul has no byproduct either. The byproducts of the body, namely children, are also different individual souls. And owing to the body, they appear as children of a particular man. The body develops because of the soul's presence, but the soul has neither offshoots nor change. Therefore, the soul is free from the 6 kinds of the body, 6 changes of the body. In the Katha Upanishad 1.2.18, we also find a similar passage which reads, I'll say you say, the Jayate Mrite Vavipaschin Nayam Kutaschin Nababuva Kaschit Adho Nityak Shastratoyam Purano Nahanyate Hanyamane Sharire. The meaning and purport of this verse is the same as in the Bhagavad Gita, but here in this verse there is one special word, vipaschit, which means learned or with knowledge. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is the symptom of the soul. Even if one does not find the soul within the heart, where he is situated, one can still understand the presence of the soul simply by the presence of consciousness. Sometimes we do not find the sun in the sky owing to clouds, or for some other reason. But the light of the sun is always there, and we are convinced that it is therefore daytime. As soon as there is a little light in the sky early in the morning, we can understand that the sun is in the sky. Similarly, since there is some consciousness in all bodies, whether man or animal, we can understand the presence of the soul. This consciousness of the soul is, however, different from the consciousness of the Supreme, because the Supreme Consciousness is all knowledge, past, present, and future. The consciousness of the individual soul is prone to be forgetful. When he is forgetful of his real nature, he obtains education and enlightenment from the superior lessons of Krishna. But Krishna is not like the forgetful soul. If so, Krishna's teachings of the Bhagavad Gita would be useless. There are 2 kinds of souls, namely the minute particle soul, Anu Atma, and the super soul, Vibhu Atma. This is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1.2.20 in this way. Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan Atma Sajanto Nihito Gohayam Tamakwatu Pashyati Vita Shoko Dhatu Prasadan Mahimanam Atmanaha. Both the super soul or Paramatma and the atomic soul, Jivatma, are situated on the same tree of the body, within the same heart of the living being. And only one who has become free from all material desires, as well as lamentations, can, by the grace of the Supreme, understand the glories of the Lord, of the soul. Krishna is the fountainhead of the super soul also, as it will be disclosed in the following chapters. And Arjuna is the atomic soul, forgetful of his real nature. Therefore he requires to be enlightened by Krishna, or by his bona fide representative, the spiritual master. So, the Jayate Mirete Bhakadachan. Now this verse just reiterates the same principle in slightly different language. Arja Nitya Shastrata Yam Purano. I said, okay, what's the real difference between Nitya and Shastrata? Eternal or permanent. But an Arjo means unborn, and Purana simply means ancient. So there's a lot of overlap here. But the punchline, so to speak, is Nahanyate Hanyamane Shariri. When the body is killed, either by some weapon, or old age, or disease, or accident, whatever it is, it's a fancy machine, very complicated. As you get older, you realize just how fragile and delicate and things. But it's going to break down eventually, for one reason or another. But you're not going to die. As I made up this little. Actually, the last verse, the first verse we read, or the one we read last week, Antavanti Medeha. I put this the main idea there. I put into a little poem, a little ditty you can remember. Everybody dies, nobody dies. See, there's like a little trick there. Every space, body dies, right? Everybody dies. Nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body or pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. Can you make a t-shirt out of that for us, Bob? Okay, good. We already have one. Did you see the one we made? No, I haven't. Yeah. Well, how does it start? Don't sin. Don't sin. You can't win. Love God, not the bod. Chant Hare Krishna. Potently. Okay, so Najayate Miyate Vakadachan. So, as I say, Prabhupada would often quote this verse because it contains the basic language here. Now, these 6 changes, this comes up again and again. Every living being, organism, goes through this. There's birth, comes into being somehow, out of an egg, out of a seed, somehow or other. And then it grows. That's the first thing that happens. The organism grows, right? And in human life, that's the long process, right? There's education and nurturing and all of these different things. So there's birth, growth, and then you reach kind of a stasis and you remain for some time. And then, generally, the process is you have children, offspring, And then there's that inevitable downgrade where you deteriorate and eventually die. Eventually, you go out of existence, and there'll never be again. There'll never be another Suresh exactly like this one or another Prakash. We're unique, Thank God, not for you, for me. But it's this inevitable, and when you see, macro items also. With you can sit on this. So like this building. This building didn't know it exists, obviously. I think it was built during or after the war. Because SanDiego is a huge Navy area, And all of this was like reclaimed land from the bay, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of it was, In any case, I think it was some kind of warehouse or something. I think a movie theater at one point, So it came into being. It was an idea, right? First it's an idea, blueprint, that whole thing, engineer, right? And then what we're looking at different causes of it. There are the items, the raw materials, clearly. That's a cause. The labor of those who put it all together. The money that went into it, investment, right? Somebody paid for it, maybe the government first. So this is, what goes into making things, especially, living beings. And there's this parabola. You come into being, and you're living, And sometimes it's not like that. So many children die, like that. But whatever it is, you come into being and you go out of being and you stay for some time. Page 86. 86. Yeah. So it's important to realize that as a first step in spiritual realization, is that I am not this changing body any more than I am my car. Right, we all, many of us have a car. We've driven a car or some other vehicle, right? And you look back in a long life, and I remember the different cars I had, right? They came into my possession. I had them for a while and used them, and then either they broke down and I junked them, or I sold them. But it wasn't the end of the world. I got another car. You transmigrate from one to another. So the body is like that. It's a car. But the problem is we forget that. And we identify with the body, whatever it is. And the amazing thing is, none of us here are children, so you can go take your consciousness back, remember some of the highlights of when you were a little 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, And we had a completely different view of life. We had a different view of ourselves, right? And you didn't know that much. There's all kinds of things you're discovering, education is going on. So your consciousness is changing. Your mind is certainly changing, body is certainly changing, but you are the knower of all those changes. In the 13th chapter, it becomes much more explicit, where Krishna, actually Arjuna asks and Krishna responds, the Kshetra Gya. Think of this body as like a field of our activity. We're able to reach out into the wider field of this world, but the body is really where it all takes place. All these sensations and thoughts and things are going on, right? So that's the field. You are the Kshetra Gya. The word jnana in Sanskrit means knowledge. And the knower is the Jna, Gya, Kshetra Gya. So we're all Kshetra Gya. We know our body. Nobody else knows anything like we know it. Of course, we don't know all that much. Can anyone explain exactly how the food gets digested and how it's sent around? You got to be a major researcher to know something about that. And there's just all kinds of mysteries about the body, how it's working. So, but at least we know the sensations. The consciousness is spread. We had that verse. Your consciousness is spread throughout the body. And you understand as soon as you stub your toe, whoa, Yeah. I the other day I had an experience. I've walked this little route from my apartment is about a block away down the alleyway. I don't know, 1,000 times already. So many times I've lived here 20 years in that apartment. So this particular day, as often, I'm chanting a verse as I come along. Chanting. It's 4:25 in the morning, and I'm coming. It's dark. I got my little flashlight, but I wasn't paying so much attention to the footing because I never had, even though it's uneven. And I was spinning up a verse, boom, I tripped, and I fell. And I instinctively, now it's completely healed. It's only happened a few days ago, but I had injury here, then the knees like that. Something, you see? Yeah, that's right. That was one. I didn't even know about that one. So suddenly, the body is not doing what you want it to do, and it's giving you all kinds of pain and trouble. I could hardly do Dandavats. I'm still having trouble because I have a bruise on this left knee. So it's pain, so that I'm doing almost like a push-up instead of a Dandava, So this is what it is. The body is a restriction on the soul. We, as spirit, we're eternal. As spirit, we're all-knowing. We're full of bliss. We're sitting at the right hand of God. We're with Krishna at every moment. In fact, He's with us right now, in our heart, every one of us. But we don't know Him. We're not conscious of Him. We've forgotten. The whole thing of being in this material world and the influence of Maya, which is Krishna's illusory energy, is that we're made to forget who we really are, what we really are, what our relation with God is, and we think we're part of this world, but we're really not. And so the Bhagavad Gita is meant to train us, giving us this essential knowledge from the Upanishads, condensed knowledge spoken by Krishna Himself. First of all, this first chapter is a kind of enlightenment. If you really understand it and you believe it, suddenly it changes everything. Because the usual way of thinking about life is to think in terms of this one life, right? That's it. That's all I know. And many people think after that we're gone, finished. You don't exist. So that's a crippled view. That's not at all the truth, the accurate truth. And so once you realize there's life after death, and there has been life before birth. It's very important to understand that aspect of it. Because other religions think we came into being at birth, and there's certainly life after death, but if you don't do the right thing in this lifetime, you go down forever. And if you do, then you go and you'll be able to sing hymns forever with the Lord. That's not true. We were never born, and we'll never die, and nobody is condemned forever to suffer. There is a lot of suffering for sinful activity and cruel and vicious activity. There is a law, but it's not forever. It's meant to teach us. How can you teach a lesson if you're condemned forever? So, just by coming to class once or chanting Hare Krishna Siddhi Didi, you won't see the other place. You'll be reborn. If you don't become perfect in this life, then you'll attend more classes next life and go on, In other words, nothing is lost in Krishna consciousness. That itself is extremely encouraging. So this verse, the Jayate Mriyate, there's no birth, there's no death. So how do we realize that? We need to act on the spiritual platform, and that means to connect, first of all, our consciousness to Krishna. And it's been made so easy in this age. Nobody's going to go off to the Himalayas, and be alone and live in a cave. I mean, we can hardly live in our own little, apartments. What is big of a cave? But that's what Krishna recommends in the 6th chapter. That's one way of doing it, but it's not good for this age, And the wonderful thing is we don't have to. By Prabhupada's efforts, he's brought us this process of chanting the holy name, of Sankirtan, of getting together and chanting alone, and that immediately connects us to Krishna. And He's in the heart, and so He gives us encouragement and intelligence by which we can take more steps to Him. And so this Bhagavad Gita is written for aspiring transcendentalists. It's not just a book of philosophy. There are a lot of shoulds here. Just as Arjuna is saying, you should fight. And Arjuna is saying, no, I'm not going to fight. And so that creates the tension, and Krishna speaks the Bhagavad Gita. And at the end Arjuna says, yes, I will fight. And so if we follow that trajectory of Arjuna, then after reading the Bhagavad Gita, we should come to the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna says very, very distinctly, 2 verses, 1865, 1866. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mama vaishasi satyante pratijane priyosi me. Just think of me, become devoted, worship me and bow down low. You'll come to me, O friend, I promise you this boon I shall bestow. Sarva dharmam parityajya mamekam sharanam bhaja aham tvam sava papebhyo mokshayasyami ma shuchaha. You notice when the curtains open, look at Radharani. She's got this mudra. This is called the Abhay Dan mudra. Abhay is fearlessness. Dan is a gift. In other words, Krishna and Radharani are saying, don't worry, don't lament. You just, stay connected to us through devotional service and everything will be fine. So Krishna is saying the same thing here at the end of the book, 1866. He says, give up all the other dharmas that, I spoke about, karma yoga, jnana yoga. That's fine for a certain stage. But if you really want to take the fast route, then just give up everything else, surrender unto me, do my will. And as he said in the previous verse, these verses are together, 65, 66, think of me. And this whole movement is meant for, that's why it's called Krishna consciousness movement. Think of me and become my devotee. And we have detailed instructions how you can do that, through practical work in your life. And recognize Krishna's supremacy, bow down to me and worship me, you'll come to me. I promise you, because you're my very dear friend. Krishna is the dear friend of all of us. He says right in the 5th chapter, what is that? Bhaktaram yagita basang sarva loka mahesh suridam sarva bhutanam. Suridam, surit. There's different kinds of friends, just like we have in the English language. We have the acquaintance. Well, I know, and we shared. We took lunch together at prasadam. And you have the closer friend, good friend, and then you have your bosom buddy, someone who you can't live without, right? Who you're ready to do anything for. So surit, the heart. Krishna, he says, the ever well wisher. Krishna is always wishing us well, but we're not taking the benefit. We're not taking the gift he's giving. So he's the friend of every living entity, even those who are arch enemies of his. He punishes them for their own good. So if we make friends with Krishna again, then we'll feel that love. The whole thing is to reawaken that natural connection of loving devotion to Krishna. So it's all beginning here by realizing we're spirit, not matter. We'll never die. Let's learn how to live on that eternal platform, and we can be happy even in this crazy, self-destructing world we live in. Just as the body dies at a certain point, all society or world can also die. So we shouldn't freak out. We should be ready by becoming Krishna conscious. Chant as much as possible and learn how to remember and serve Krishna. All right. Any questions on this particular verse? Very important verse. Okay, back to Ed. Where is that mic? We need the mic. Yeah, we do have another one. It doesn't have a...
Well, it's a picture I have in my mind, and I'm not even sure how to visualize this. So the soul never came into being. It's permanent. It's always been there. This universe is billions of years old. I have this picture of all these souls just sort of hanging out, waiting for the earth to be formed, so we can, exercise our desire for sense gratification on earth. There must have been some other place for these souls to go.
Yes, there is.
Before the earth.
Yes, into the body of Mahavishnu.
Aha.
When the annihilation takes place. And I'm not sure we really want to be around for that. No. It's quite dramatic. I mean, we're already experiencing all these fires, Just imagine the whole earth burning up, And then the rains come, and they come, and they come, and they come. Everything is completely flooded, and everyone dies. I mean, everybody dies, but nobody dies. Well, what happened to those souls? They start merging into the body of Mahavishnu. And we stay in suspended animation. We don't die. Our karma is still there. But it's like we're in deep, deep sleep without any dream for a long, long time. For the in-breath of Mahavishnu, which takes a lifetime of Lord Brahma, 311 trillion years. And then he breathes out again, and these universes get manifest. They're emanating from his body, and through the agency of Garbhodakshay Vishnu and Lord Brahma, we start manifesting again, and then we take up where we left off. So that's what happens. It's and who knows how many millions of lifetimes of Brahma we've been doing that. So the whole idea is, don't waste this life. Don't waste this life. Don't waste a moment. You know.
Who doesn't have memories? Like if we were, like definitely we were at Vishnu.
Yes, we were there. Yeah.
So we don't.
We're not going to remember that. Just like we can't. Can you remember your last life?
No.
That's a real blessing. Just imagine, because each one of our last lives, we went through, you know, some old age or disease. We got murdered, you know, whatever. A real traumatic experience. Krishna lets us forget. He says in the 15th chapter, Matak smritir jnanam apohanangsha. From me come knowledge and forgetfulness and remembrance. So, you know, tragically, you know, with all these wars going on and soldiers going and coming in America, there's a lot of PTSD, where it's like the soldiers go through horrible things. Sometimes the trauma is the things that they witnessed, that they were part of, that they were ordered to do, and now they regret. Right? Some children got killed, innocent people, whatever, you know. It weighs on their mind a lot, you know. Nightmares, all kinds of things. So imagine if you could forget. You know, if I could just forget that, right? Sometimes that happens. So we've been through so many traumas in our previous lives, but in this life we're able to forget. And so so we have, as human beings, we have the freedom to direct our consciousness in where we want to, you know. Now sometimes that becomes, we can't. We're so addicted to a certain person or experience or something, a video game, drug, that we feel impelled. That happens. It starts out as just your decision to do something, and after a while you're forced to do it. You got to go to rehab. Your friends, right? I compare, Prabhupada's coming to America with performing an intervention. Isn't it? If someone's really addicted, and you like them and you're friends, just, hey Prabhu, you're ruining your life. You're going. Let's go. You're going to rehab now. And okay, and as soon as you say okay, that's your first step to recovery. And what happens? You go into a place where there's a controlled environment. You're with others who are also struggling with the same problem, and you have groups, and you try to buck each other up. You recognize a higher force. We had this experience here, and I don't think anyone when we're here. I forget his name now, but this fellow came in. You may not know this, but up the street, up Cass, there's a major what is it called? Alcoholics Anonymous meeting they have up there in a church. So he came down from there, and he was curious about what we're doing, and he said, "Well, there's a lot of parallels actually, And he even invited me up to speak up there. Recognizing the higher power, taking strength from association, and then you get a little, coin. Says, "Oh, I've been dry for 6 years or 6 months or something." So he wanted me to speak, and but I couldn't say, "My name is Dravida, and I'm an alcoholic." It's true. I used to drink beer when I was about 18, 19. So I have my coin. I've been dry for 44 years. That didn't work out. I mean, I did speak, but I couldn't, really be part. But you see, it's the same idea. In other words, we don't, normal people, who aren't alcoholics, aren't drug addicts, they don't feel that kind of a force that are forcing them to do something. But factually, they are. It's just that it works in more subtle ways sometimes. The things you become addicted to, accustomed to, your identification as a certain part of the family even, but that's all temporary. But you have certain likes that you do and so forth. And it's kind of addiction. In the 15th chapter, we'll read this wonderful, very terse but revealing description of transmigration. And Krishna describes that the consciousness you develop in this lifetime is what determines your next birth. So the mind, right? That's where all the thoughts and everything, your most prominent thought. So the mind and the soul takes the mind with it. When the gross body dies, the one we see in the mirror, the subtle body of mind, intelligence, and ego goes on. And within that subtle body, that becomes the template for the next gross body. And he describes, you get, what is it? Shrotram, chakshu, sparshanam, rasanam, granam, evacha. You get a certain set of senses. An eye, ears, touch, all of these senses we get, grouped around the mind. And then it says, Vishayanupasevate. Through those senses, we can be reincarnated if we're real sinful into a lower species even, But assume it's a human life. So through these senses, you become accustomed to a certain kind of things that you like to see and hear and smell and taste and touch. So the word is Vishayan Upasevate. Vishayan, it means the object of the senses. We all have experience every day. And Upasevate, Prabhupada has, I think, experiences or something. But there's another meaning, and that means become addicted to. Just like, certain peoples in this world, you go and they're eating foods that you wouldn't imagine are even like part of the things that anyone would eat, But they're used to it. That's their delicacies, And so in other words, we're all addicts here. And in order to get free of it, we need an intervention. And that intervention comes, Krishna himself comes, intervenes, or he sends his great devotees like Srila Prabhupada to kind of wake us up. Everyone knows, right? We go out on the Harinam, you see in parties, And so in the early days, especially when Krishna consciousness was new, the parties would be sometimes ridiculed, jeered at, I remember when I lived in Miami for 6 years, we'd go up to Fort Lauderdale for the spring break. All these kids, thousands of kids. In those days, that was one of the main places they would all come to. And so we would do our Harinam and, beer would come down from somewhere, and oblations being offered, and all kinds of things, all kinds of chants would come. They weren't actually chanting Hare Krishna; they were chanting. But here we were, going along, on the beach, and that was like play. I mean, devotees have been attacked and all kinds of things. And people, this is alien to them, But it's an intervention. You're trying to draw people's attention, and of course we have literature, for those who were curious, and intervene into the life of illusion that produces so much suffering. This is really the heart of a Vaishnava, is somehow or other to give this knowledge and give the means by which you can realize the knowledge and avoid, eons of suffering that we've already experienced, and somehow to end it and return back to guided. So it's an ongoing mission, and I'm happy. This is like what we used to call a capacity crowd, I mean, some of you remember we had very small numbers, and now it's more, there's even people on it. So we've been through this book. I've been giving this class since 1983. I used to do it in Miami, then I came here and I've been giving it. So now it's people are finally realizing it. All right, let's go to the next couple of verses. 21. Veda vinashinam nityam yahinam majam avyayam katam supurusha partha kam gata yati hantikam. Notice this word hanti and its variations, as in nahanyate, hanyamani, comes up again and again. It means killing. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, eternal, unborn, and immutable, kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? In other words, how can you think that you're going to do it? Because that was his whole thing, is that, I don't want to kill my relatives. I don't want to kill. You're not going to kill anybody. Nobody dies. Purport, everything has its proper utility, and a man who is situated in complete knowledge knows how and where to apply a thing for its proper utility. Similarly, violence also has its utility, and how to apply violence rests with the person in knowledge. Although the justice of the peace awards capital, he's referring to a judge. Although the justice of the peace awards capital punishment to a person condemned for murder, the justice of the peace cannot be blamed because he orders violence to another person according to the codes of justice. Excuse me. In the Manu Samhita, the law book of for mankind, it is supported that a murderer should be condemned to death so that in his next life he will not have to suffer for the great sins he has committed. Therefore, the king's punishment of hanging a murderer is actually beneficial. Similarly, when Krishna orders fighting, it must be concluded that violence is for supreme justice, and thus Arjuna should follow the instruction, knowing well that such violence committed in the act of fighting for Krishna is not violence at all, because at any rate the man, or rather the soul, cannot be killed. So for the administration of justice, so-called violence is permitted. A surgical operation is not meant to kill the patient, but to cure him. Therefore, the fighting to be executed by Arjuna at the instruction of Krishna is with full knowledge. So there is no possibility of sinful reaction. You know the term, this can become kind of famous, this tough love, where the parents have an incorrigible kid, adolescent, he's harming himself and getting into all these things. So they put him in like a semi-military environment, and ideally, he'll get some sense through the through the discipline there, and he'll thank his parents for doing that. What is that? Prabhupada would tell the story about one kid. His parents died. This is in India. I don't know what years, 30s, 40s, and he was taken in by his aunt. But his aunt didn't discipline him. She thought that if she was just very gentle with him and allowed him to do what he wanted, then that would be the way she expressed her love. So he got into trouble. He did some crime or something, and I don't know if he was going to be executed or something. Yeah, he committed murder. So the aunt came to see him in jail, and she said, "Oh, come close, I want to tell you something." And he bit her ear. Did he bite it off? Bit her ear. I think it's a real story. Because she didn't, discipline the kid. That's real love. So similarly, Krishna, he loves all of us, forever. Problem is, we don't know about him or reciprocate the love. We're placing it in all kinds of material things. And oftentimes we commit sin in that regard and suffer. But the suffering is meant to reform us. And that only has meaning when we can understand the meaning of the suffering. And that's why we have the books, and that's why this movement is manifested. Because there has to be the teachings and also the exemplary personality who can show us a different way to live in the world, be happy and peaceful without any kind of sin at all. You see? Tapping into that, what Prabhupada called the reservoir of pleasure, which is in all of our hearts. This is the wonderful thing about Krishna consciousness, is that how can people be satisfied with so little? This was an amazing thing in the 60s, when suddenly you had, the movement growing, and here were these people clad in these robes, In the early days, everyone just wore sheets. There was no question of dhotis. The men and the women were wrapped up in the yellow sheets. And so, but look at their faces. They're out there. I have some pictures of those old Harinams. Everyone is literally chanting, And they're living very simply. And you tap into that pleasure of Krishna consciousness, and it's way better it's a lot cheaper, and there's no downside. Whatever sense gratification, there's always a downside. First of all, it costs a lot of money, and second of all, your chances are you're committing some kind of sin, and you're going to have to pay for it. Krishna says right in the Bhagavad Gita, one of my favorite verses, Harekrishna. Yeah. If you don't need chairs, you just get the seats. There's so many. Yeah, pull some. And Yahi sang sparjaja boga dukayona evate. This is a truly revolutionary verse, the phrase. What does he say there? Sang sparjaja boga. Sparshaja means born of the touch, a sensation. You see? That happiness, here on this side, guys. That's this lady on that side. Here. Anywhere over here. Please. So, some sparja is we experience it all the time. The taste, the touch, this is pleasurable and there's painful sensations. So, but the pleasure, this is boga, the pleasure you experience is the source of your suffering. Yehi sang sparja boga, dukkha yona evate. And what is it? The main downside is adyantavanta. It has a beginning and an end. In other words, no matter how intense it is, it can't continue. If you try to make it continue, it turns into pain right away, right? So that itself is a kind of suffering, because don't forget, we're qualitatively one with Krishna, right? We're eternal. We're eternally conscious beings, and our natural original nature, original state is Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. As Krishna is. There's a nice Vedanta Sutra. Vedanta Sutra, Brahma Sutras, these encompass the essence of all the Vedic teachings. So they say, Anandamaya Vyasat. It says the absolute personality of Godhead, the Supreme Brahman, is always full of bliss. Anandamaya really means made of bliss. Is overflowing with happiness. Well, we can't say that about ourselves. Even if we get all the things that we dream that will make us happy, we'll never reach that state. Just the opposite. So then the question arises, well, how can we be happy? If it's not going to be sense gratification, what are we going to do? And Krishna answers, this is where real happiness lies. Your happiness lies in connecting to Krishna. Even in this material world, at Christmas time, I wasn't born as a Christian. I was born in a Jewish family, although we weren't very strict, But I remember at Christmas time, I would always get in the mood. We would sing hymns in school, and there was always that giving thing, doing good for others, charity, and all of these things. And there was a certain pleasure there, in doing good for others, helping others. And that's a sign, that's a little example of what the real source of pleasure is. By giving Krishna pleasure, and Krishna's in everyone's heart, and everyone becomes happy. To really serve give someone a chance to be unlimitedly and eternally happy, introduce them to Krishna, somehow or other. Give them an invitation, a harekrishna, a book, somehow or other, to start their process back to Krishna. That's where really happiness lies. Look at what's going on in the spiritual world. The simple cowherds, are always blissful, just varieties of loving exchange. And Lord Chaitanya showed how you can experience it right on this earth. By Sankirtan, by chanting, dancing, and singing Krishna's name. So it's a revolutionary concept. It's not the senses that are going to make you happy. It's connecting the senses to Krishna's happiness that your soul becomes happy, and then you really become peaceful. Brahma Bhutta, Prasannatma. Prasannatma means always joyful. Nashochati Nakanchati, not lamenting or hankering for anything. Imagine in a state like that. You don't feel you need anything, even if you have very little. The perfect example is the Goswamis of Vrindavan. It's described that especially Raghunath Das and Rupa and Sanatan, they were very, very wealthy. Imagine like billionaires or multi-millionaires. But they met Lord Chaitanya, gave it all up. And this beautiful verse, and we'll have to end soon, I'm running out of battery and we're running out of time. It says, Chaktva turna mashesha mandala patishening sada tuchavat bhutva dina ganeshako kadunaya kaupina kantashito gopi bhava rasamratam da hari kallola magno mohur vande rupa sanatano raguyagoshi jiva gopalago. I offer my obeisance to the 6 Goswamis. Chaktva turnam, they quickly, without delay, without hesitating, gave up their vast wealth and influence and pelf, and 2 of them were like right and left hand to the king, and they had all opportunity for sense gratification, but they just gave it up as insignificant when they met Lord Chaitanya. What did they do? Bhutva Dina Ganesha Ko Karunaya, out of compassion for the mass of fallen souls like us, and also their contemporaries, they went to Vrindavan, became as austere as it's possibly to be. They had no homes, they had no clothes, they had no wife and kids, they had no money. And then they rarely ate or slept. That's about as austere as you can live. But they were more blissful than anybody. They had the great wealth. They were diving into this nectar ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna, which is the highest, most intense, fulfilling rasa you can have and experience. And it's available to us. We just have to work for it. And so they showed that the happiest is not through the material thing, but it's through your state of consciousness and your activities in Krishna consciousness. So these are our examples, and they left wonderful books. Much of what we read in this Bhagavad Gita even is Srila Prabhupada's commentary, but it's based on the writings of the Goswamis. Baladeva Vijayabhushan, who was following in the footsteps of the Goswamis. So we have the great opportunity to pursue this. Okay, we have time for one little poem, and then we'll have the those curtains will open, and we'll see the deities in a few minutes. So here's a one that's pertinent by a great devotee named Madhavendra Puri. He says, how does this start? Kama dinang katana katita palita dhuni deshas. Tesham jata mayna karuna natrapano prashantihi. Utsvijayatan ati yadupate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayata shadaramabhayam mamnayung svatmadase. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy. Yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting these hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. And this is right in the middle of the teachings of Sanatana Goswami, of Lord Chaitanya to Sanatana Goswami. It's available in our book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.